All right, it is time to begin the webinar. I'll go ahead and do, the standard introduction while people are still joining in. So it's good to have everybody back in with our webinars. It's been a while since we've had one, and things have changed since we last did one of these. All sorts of fun things going on across the world and the country and in our local communities that's kind of changing how we work. And that's sort of what we're looking to do today, is talk a little bit about some of those changes, how to do more with fewer resources. So we're gonna go over some ideas, some ways that environmental labs can use certain products to help them get a little bit more out of the limited resources that we have available. As usual, this is being recorded. We'll be sending out emails afterwards if anybody needs to go back and watch anything or just like to hear the sound of my voice. I don't know. This will be available on our website later. And any questions that you have, please do not use the chat feature. Please submit all questions through the questions panel. You should see that on your control panel there. And I will get to those at the end of the webinar as time permits. Everybody's muted. Kind of fun actually seeing some coworkers through the Environmental Express and Cold Farmer family join in. It's kind of good to see you guys. Make sure to give good reviews back to everybody, right? But we'll go ahead and get started. So like I said, we're going to talk about how to do more with fewer resources. This is a little bit different from my standard webinars. Most of the time, I am presenting purely technical information, talking about different test procedures that we do, understanding how they work, what they do, and of course talking about the Environmental Express products that are applicable to those specific tests. Today is not going to be a technical presentation as you're used to from me. A little bit different from how I do it. It is going to be more of a product highlight, talking about specific products, bringing those to your attention, but the idea is to help you get a better feel for what you can do to make best use of the time that you have. So let's go ahead and get going. Our story so far, we all know what's going on. Right now, we've got shelter-in-place orders. We've got people, non-essential workers. Hopefully, a lot of us don't fall in that category because we are working in the water industry. We're providing that safety net, and hopefully a lot of people are able to continue doing their jobs as needed. However, we still have that social distancing that we have to take into effect in order to be safe in what we're working with. And most importantly, and this is one thing that's affecting our company a lot, is we've got reduced staff. We've been able to keep our production and assembly group going, but in order to follow all the appropriate safety guidelines, we've had to kind of reduce staff at one time in the building. And as far as I know, everybody is still getting their appropriate time in, but we don't have as many people working at one time, and that is hurting our capacity. That's hurting what we've been able to do in order to manufacture things. And so I know that if labs are having those same situations, then they're probably still able to bring people in to do work, but maybe not as many people at one time as they've previously been able to do. And so they've got fewer people working on performing these tests, fewer people working on reviewing data, fewer people working on getting things out to customers. And so it's harder to take care of everything that we want to do. Maybe the overall work is still there, but our ability to perform it all is not the same. And so that's what we're going to talk about. Environmental Express has always been about helping take care of those small bits of what I've often called lab drudgery, the things that you don't really need a science degree to necessarily know how to do and do well, but that are required for us to do as part of our testing. And that's what we've always tried to help labs do better on. Minimize the preparation that you have to do, minimize the hands-on time that you have to put in something so that you can actually use those skills that you've been schooled for, that you know how to do, and that you are uniquely qualified to be able to do. Data review, troubleshooting, actually setting things up and kind of understanding the science of what's going on. And so that's what we're going to talk about today, is how we can help out in the preparation time, how we can help out in the hands-on time for what you are working with and working on. First thing we're going to talk about is metals digestion. Pardon me while I take a sip of water here. So automation of metals digestion. Metals digestion, those of you who've worked in the metals digestion labs know that there is a lot of prep time involved in getting a batch of samples ready. Getting all your samples together, pouring things up, getting stuff dosed out, getting those digestion protocols programmed in right or controlled properly and so forth. So we're going to talk a little bit about how we can make our metals digestion work better. First thing I want to talk about is our AutoBlock fill. This is one of our more recent introductions into the AutoBlock line. And it's kind of an intermediate step, a little bit more complex than just a standard hot block, but not quite to the full level of the auto block, which we'll get to after this section. So what we're looking at with the AutoBlock fill is something that is intended to automate that repetitive action and potential danger involved in adding your different digestion reagents, acids and whatever else you're working with to your samples. The idea is you've got that dispensing arm, which in this picture is flush up against the tower on the right-hand side of the image, and it goes over to each individual cup and dispenses the proper reagents in the doses that you have specified in your protocol. Uses the Masterflex pumping technology from Cole Parmer, and it's very accurate, very precise, does exactly what you tell it to do, which of course requires you to know what you need to do to tell it. It's a modular construction. We've actually also got this cool little airlight enclosure that's designed to go over it. If you do decide that you digest directly on the station, that can help to keep the atmosphere around it nice and clean, prevent particulates and contaminants from falling in this block while it digests. You can put it comes to you in pieces. It's the tower and the back and the base and a few other pieces there to hold things in place are the main components, but it's a fairly simple thing. Takes less than an hour. If you're like some of our sales booth or our sales force who have been at different shows and have had to assemble these things several times, you can probably get it up in, I don't know, Michael might jump in a little bit later and let us know what his record is, but I want to say 20, 25 minutes if you're really good and know what you're doing. It's a simple thing to do. And it's designed, again, to sit there and automate the addition of those digestion reagents. We've got 5 different reagent bottles that we can have, but one of them has to be water, and that's used for flushing the system and rinsing in between things and doing those different things. So basically, you've got 4 different acids or other reagents that you can use on there. Most of the methods that I'm familiar with use 2 to 3 different ones, so you're rarely going to hit that maximum as far as space is allowed. It's got a 5-way switching valve on the side, and it's all basically designed to run there on board. You don't have to have any kind of a separate computer attached to it in order to run it. Now, if you're doing any programming on it, changing your methods around, things like that, you will attach a laptop via USB cable. But for most day-to-day operations, you can operate it directly there from that touch screen that you can see on that front panel. It'll save all your methods on there that you need to, and it can even save your default configurations. If you're usually running a specific number of samples in a specific setup on the block, then you can save that as a default and just always use that base layout and change the batch number or whatever, however you want to identify it. One of the cool things that we've also integrated with this is that you don't have to run it with, let's say you're one of the larger labs that has the multiple hot blocks, 5, 6 blocks or so running at a time, 2, 3 even sometimes. You don't even have to be that large to be able to need that many blocks to go through your day. You don't have to have a separate auto block fill for each one of those hot blocks. We've implemented basically an empty shell of a hot block, which is just the case. And the idea there is that you would put the racks on there with your samples in it and allow the auto block fill to go and dispense through each of those and fill everything up with the reagents that it needs. Pull the racks off, put them onto one of your actual hot blocks that's already been preheated and get that digestion process going. And then you can load up the fill with your next set of racks and continue running through and get multiple batches filled up with their acids, and then transfer those over to a hot block for the heating digestion portion of it. So it's a very functional piece of equipment, and you can obviously see how this will save not only the time of the analyst in dispensing all of those different reagents in, but also the various calibrations of all your multiple different pipettes and things that you would, the equipment that you would need. All of that's time savings, sometimes hard to measure, but they can definitely add up and help you be more consistent in what you are working with. So that's the auto block fill. Then the next step up would be the auto block. We're actually on Auto Block Plus is the current version name, and this one actually fully automates your metals digestion process. The fill is limited just to being able to dispense reagents into your cups as you program it. It does not control the hot block at all. You have the hot block set up in, so let's go back one. So here we've got the hot block set in the tray. That's a functional block. You can tell from the controller on the front. You can turn that on and manually control that heat as you need and do your digestion protocol right there on the auto block fill if you so desire. But it is a separate control from the fill. That fill station does not turn the block on, does not control the heat, doesn't do any of those things for you. The Auto Block Plus will do all of that. You still have to fill the samples and load the samples on the tray. That is still required of you. But once that is done, the Auto Block Plus will actually handle almost the entire rest of the digestion process for you. It will do the same dispensing of reagents into the cups as you need, but then it also has the extra benefit of being able to control the heating on that block. And it is, you can see here in this picture how those cups are elevated up above the block. That's in the fill position to allow nice, safe, controlled dispensing of your reagents into your cups. There's also a cool position where the dispensing probe will be moved out of the way and the samples are lifted up entirely out of the block and resting above it. So you can set this to run overnight without having to worry about your samples evaporating to nothingness. Once the digestion process is done, it will raise the samples up out of the block and allow them to cool without continued digestion or evaporation to occur. Both of these systems, Auto Block Plus and Auto Block Fill, do come pre-programmed with a bunch of different methods. Most of the EPA methods, the standard methods, those SW846 methods, we've got those different protocols programmed in with the reagents and the volumes that they need. And so they can do, you won't have to worry about programming anything if you don't need to. If you have any kind of modifications that you've done, certain things that you need to do with specific sample types that your lab works with, those are pretty simple to work in. The steps are very self-explanatory as far as how to program different methods or edit different methods. So it's not a hard thing to work with. Another cool thing about AutoBlock Plus is it actually does a filter volume at the end of your analysis. And so once it's done, it has a level sensor inside that will detect the level of liquid in your cup and then fill to volume back up to the final volume that you've specified for it to go to 25, 50, however that works for you. A nice extra benefit of that is that you can set it to not fill if the cup has gone dry. There are certain digestion protocols that specifically say do not allow the sample to evaporate to dryness. And so that final fill to volume step does allow it to check for the presence of liquid in the cup prior to filling. And so if you have set it not to fill if dry, then it will skip over any cups that it detects as being empty, having no liquid left in them. And you'll know that something happened on that sample, and you'll need to re-prep it and get it going again. It's got all kinds of safety checks built into it. It has leak and pressure sensors. There is a HEPA filtered air intake, and then that fume hood on top vents into your existing fume hood. It is not we call it a fume hood. It is not a regulation fume hood. It still does have to pipe into the approved safety equipment in order to properly exhaust fumes. But this makes it very simple. You don't have to use up space inside your fume hood to hold this. This system will allow you to load up 10 different sites of reagents, technically 8 reagents and 2 DI water ports, 1 DI water on each side. Most of the times we find our labs are doing this with their mercury digestion. So they have their standard metals digestions on one side of the instrument, and then the various reagents for mercury digestion on the other side, just to keep those two separate so that you don't have to worry about cross-contamination. Everybody knows that mercury is pretty easily contaminated, and you have to be very cautious with that. So most of the time we see labs using those two sides for those two divisions of work. All right. So those are our two main areas that help out as far as optimizing your time in the metals area. The prep work specifically with the AutoBlock fill, and then the prep and the hands-on time with the digestion for the AutoBlock Plus. The AutoBlock Plus allows you to run overnight, allows you to have that digesting when there's no one there that needs to be watching it during that time frame. And so that helps you out with filling some of that dead time and eliminating a lot of the hands-on time that you have to do. We've got a lot of other products that, while not necessarily specifically focused on better utilization of work time, can help out with some of the bits and pieces of the different steps that you do with your metals analyses, whether it be the various filtration options we've got. You can see there the, let's see if I can get my pointer. There we go. So our filter mates here, or our flip mates here, both are good filtration options. The ultimate clean cups for anybody needing that very trace levels of background that you need to be able to count on. Our different reflux options with the watch glasses and the reflux caps. These guys here are specifically designed to work with the AutoBlock Fill and the AutoBlock Plus to allow reagent addition while that reflux cap is on there. The hole in the middle is to allow sample to be added, or liquid to be added through the middle of it. And it still does provide adequate refluxing action during the digestion process. So that's our metals area. Those are some of the things that we wanted to highlight there. Some ways that you can make your metals analysis just a little bit more efficient in what you're working on. All right. Oops. I guess we have to go off the highlight in order. There we go. Okay. So next we're going to talk about our solids testing, and of course one of my favorite word plays ever, taking the tedious out of TDS testing. I'm sure anybody who's attended my previous broadcasts has heard that before, but hopefully there's some new people out there who haven't heard this one and you got a little chuckle out of it. If not, well, I'll try again at some later time. There may be some other word plays and puns further on in the broadcast. All right, so just a quick review of TDS. We've done this before. We know we're evaporating about 100 milliliters typically is what we're working with. The methods talk about, standard method talks about porcelain, platinum, or high silica glass. If your lab is running platinum evaporating dishes, I would like to know about that. I've not met one yet. I'm still hoping. And then there's all the preparation that gets involved in getting this TDS vessel or these evaporation vessels ready to go. You got to wash them. You got to rinse them. You got to dry them for an hour. Well, technically, so for total solids, an hour at 104 C. For dissolved solids at 180 C. And really, that's just an at least time. It doesn't specify an upper limit of how long these things dry. And then they get stored in a desiccator until ready for use. Or if you're like most labs, you just leave them in the oven until, because that desiccator space is very precious, and you leave them in the oven stacked up in a corner until you're ready to use them, and pull them out and stick them in the desiccator to cool off before you get ready to use them so you can get that initial weight. We've all been there and know how that's like. And then the biggest time sinks in our TDS analysis is our cooling time. The preparation time, the washing and preparing, yes, that does take a little bit of hands-on time, and that does take a little bit of oven time. It's not something that you can just jump into, but proper planning can take care of that, but it is something that can be addressed. The evaporation time and the drying time in the oven is really where a lot of the time frustrations come in. That and the repetition of the cooling and weighing that you have to do. So after the sample is evaporated, you have to be at least an hour for TDS at that 180 degree oven time frame. So you evaporate your liquid at whatever temperature you're working with. Most people are using their TSS ovens. And then after that water's all evaporated, it still has to be at least an hour at 180 degrees. And then it has to cool down. And everybody knows those crucibles take a while to cool. Good rule of thumb is it's going to take about an hour to get to a balanced temperature, a stable balanced temperature, so that you can weigh them accurately. And you always need to get that same weight or that same time frame whenever you're doing it, so that you can be consistent in those weights that you do. Because we all know the most frustrating part is to get your initial residue weight, put it back in the oven, dry it for another hour, bring it back out, let it sit for another hour in your desiccator so that you can weigh it again, and then be off by 0.6 milligrams. And so you get frustrated, say mean things under your breath, and stick it back in the oven, and then you bring it back out, and it gets back in. Now it's back to its initial weight, but it's still 0.6 milligrams off again. And so those are the time frames that we really get frustrated with, and that we can that we want to be able to avoid. Those of you who haven't heard about our stable weigh vessels yet, this is what we've introduced to help work around and kind of accommodate those frustrations and make them a little less frustrating. Basically, what we've got is a lightweight vessel, entirely made out of plastic. Everybody calls them TDS bags. We try to make it sound a little more scientific and call them vessels, but we'll know what you're talking about. And these are prepared, pre-weighed, ready to go, disposable evaporating vessels. What we've got is this material is functional up to 200 degrees Celsius. Potentially goes higher than that. That's as far as we pushed it because 180 is the limit for your evaporation, and there's no need to go any higher than that. They hold at least about 300 milliliters, and they're ready to go out of the box. They weigh less than 4 grams. We originally had it as about 3.6 grams, but I realized the picture showed weights of 3.8 and 3.9, so I just changed that to say less than 4. And I think we've made the containers just a little bit bigger, adding a little bit more weight on them since the initial design process. But these things are ready to go right out of the box. They'll save you the preparation time as far as washing and drying and weighing, more importantly, those crucibles to begin with. And then the real big thing is that they cool and come to balanced temperature a lot faster. Our official line is 15 minutes. Take them out of the oven, stick them in the desiccator, 15 minutes, they'll be ready to go. Anecdotally, I have achieved stable weights in just a regular room temperature lab. I think we keep our lab at about 20 C. And just pulling them out of the oven, putting them on the counter long enough to get everything out of the oven and close the oven door, and then walking things from the oven over to our balance. And then, the desiccator that we were using at the time was right there beside the balance. And then in that amount of time, they were ready to go. There's a few different things you can do to help speed up that cool down process. But because they're so thin and so easy to work with, they do cool a lot faster. And because they are such lightweight, we've reduced the order of the mass by an order of magnitude. They're a lot more reproducible in the weights that you can achieve, and so you're able to get those replicate weights a lot faster. And then because they are disposable, there's no need to worry about washing and weighing afterwards. Just some real quick compliance updates on these. They are and have been 100% compliant with the AFTM method. That is one of the approved methods in 40 CFR. Most of us, however, use standard methods, and so these have been included in the latest update for standard methods. That's the 23rd edition. Standard methods 2540-2015 is the revision year for it. 40 CFR still lists 2540-2011 as the approved method. That version was approved before the standard method update was put into effect. And so that's what we've got. And we've been waiting on the federal government to go through their method update rule and approve the latest revisions. That's in process. We'll show that on the next slide. But what you can do is, because it is cited in standard methods now, it's an official method recognized by the standard methods group. This does give you a little bit more flexibility in citing this modification in your lab, and we'll talk about that as well, how to do that. So the method update rule, the most recent one was proposed, or the proposed method update rule was issued in October of last year. The public comment period ended at the end of December last year. I had a few conversations with Lim Walker. I bumped into him at FitCon back in, however long ago that's been, back in early March. And he said that it is in process. It is going through various people's desks and getting the sign-offs that it needs. So he expected the update rule to be published. He said soon. I don't know what government means when they say soon, and I'm sure some of this recent shelter-in-place stuff is slowing some things down, but it is in the process of going through all the different channels that it needs to go through. Alternate test procedure, you do not have to do an alternate test procedure because we have not made any fundamental change to the chemistry or the detection method. Only thing that has been changed is the equipment. That means that you can just do a method modification, document everything that you do, Have your comparison studies. Make sure you talk to your state body. They're the ones who have the ultimate say-so in whether they accept that or not. If you want, I can chat with the state body. I've talked to a couple different people, and most of the time, I've only had one exception. I'm sorry for you in West Virginia. Most of the time, once they understand what's going on and what's not being changed, they've been good with it. California's been a little bit iffy too sometimes. I'm still not sure what their official stance is. Some people are using it. Some people said they can't use it, so I'm not sure what's going on in California. But just about everybody else that I've talked to has been on board with these. We have a lot of data and documentation on our website that you can download. It's always been my experience that if you shove a ream of paper with words and numbers on them at auditors, they'll do a cursory glance and presume that you truly do have all this information, which you will. This is all valid information. Auditors, I hope if there's any of you on here that no offense intended, and of course now they're going to really dive into you on the next audit that they do. I'm sorry. But having more data is always good when justifying what you're doing. And then, of course, there's a lot of other things that we've got to offer in the solids testing realm. Prepared the various levels of preparation on your filtration, on your filters, different things, different products to use in making the TDS analysis go better. This one here, even if you're not using our StableWave product, this is actually one of the cool little things that I've been most excited about having that came out of working with the StableWave vessel, is we've got a multi-plate TDS filtration system set up where this will allow you to filter up to 6 different TDS samples at one time. And you filter directly into the container. These are set up with that little inner ring to hold one of the TDS vessels, StableWave vessels open, but they work just as well with crucibles or whatever else you're using. So even if you are not using the StableWave system, this can help a lot in doing more TDS samples at one time if you're in a position where you've got to do multiples. Oops, my highlighter tool won't go away. There we go. Try that. Okay. So there we are. Lots of different things to help you out in the solids laboratory. Okay, next comes BOD. Now, I wish that I could tell you that I had a way to shorten the BOD analysis time. I would love to be able to say, oh yeah, there's this cool little trick you can do and get it done in 24 hours. Sorry, spoiler alert, that does not exist yet, not in any kind of approved capacity. And so, no, there is no real hands-on time saving with the BOD test. But what we can do is we can help you out with the preparation. So if anybody is still using glass bottles, washing those bottles is your biggest time sink. That's just there. Getting those things cleaned and ready to go. Even if you have your dishwasher, loading those up and getting them out and so forth, that takes your time. Obviously, our recommendation there is switching to disposable. I'm not sure who this is. I would love to know who this person is and why she's so happy about doing BODs. I feel like it's mostly just posed for that picture that she's smiling, but working obviously with the disposable bottle, BOD bottles, is going to save lots of that preparation time. Potentially some of those auxiliary staff in the lab that aren't necessarily needed to do the testing, but do some of the preparing, your glassware washers, your stockroom people, those kinds of people may be some of the ones that have been furloughed at this time and that you're trying to have to cover some of the work that they've done. So eliminating some of that washing that you would normally have to do with glass bottles is probably the biggest time savings you can do in your BOD testing. There are various automated systems that can help as far as filling and working with your BOD samples. We don't have anything that we can offer you in that arena right now. That's another thing that I'd love to be able to have, but that's not currently in our offerings. And this applies to lots of your tests, not just for BOD, but the preparation of your various reagents. I know that when I was in the lab, preparing your various standards, your various reagents, weighing things out, getting the right volumetric flask, bringing the volume, sometimes having to cool if you've added acids, different things. All of those things, especially documentation. I'll go ahead and give a shout out for the QA officers out there. Documenting the preparation of your reagents. I know that was probably the most frustrating part of when I was working in the lab is getting all that done, because I really just wanted to get my reagents made so I can get my testing done. That paperwork, there's a reason I'm not an accountant. Paperwork sometimes feels like a hassle, but it's important and you've got to do it. And so using prepared things, prepared reagents, prepared standards will help a lot in minimizing that time that you are spending not doing testing work. Our GGA standard, not only is it prepared for you, but it's actually pre-dosed for you. It comes ready to go in those little vials. You use the whole volume. You don't even have to measure anything out. Making the dilution water. If anybody is still doing dilution water manually, meaning making all those different reagents and then measuring out all those different reagents into your water, that also can take some time. And so just having those prepared dilution water concentrates, being able to just dump that into the water that you're getting ready to use, will go a long way in cutting out the little bits here and there. Sometimes you may think, oh, that's just 5 minutes. But if you can save 5 minutes 12 times a day, that's an hour that you've now recovered that you can put to use doing something else. So it's not always the big, huge chunks that are going to be most effective. It's lots and lots of little things that can really bring the time into your day and help you be more effective in what you've got to work with. So there's another one, making BOD less demanding. Lots of other different things, racks and meters and probes and incubators and different things. Lots of stuff. If you need something, call your sales rep. Get them to make them work. I know they're trying hard these days, but it's tough for them not being able to go out and visit you. So I know they would love to hear from you. Honestly, even if it's just to call and confirm that certain things are going well, just kind of let them know that you're still functioning, that you're still working, and that'll help them to be able to do a little bit more about getting to know you better and being able to help you better in what they're doing. Oil and grease. We're going to talk specifically about solid phase extraction. I hope no one is having to work with that frustration that is liquid-liquid extraction. I've done those a few times, and that is some true tediousness. I can't make quite the same wordplay here as you do with TDS, but that is a very long exercise in patience. Hopefully we've all seen it. Hopefully we haven't all had to do it. But you got your separatory funnels. You're shaking them up with your solvents and your sample, and then you're letting them separate and separating your solvent out and keeping that for evaporation. Any extraction process has to be repeated more than once. You don't ever get everything extracted in your first go through. And so having to redo that shaking, the standard is 3 times extraction to get complete recovery. Generally, you're using about 30 mils of hexane per sample for the extraction. You got to use more to rinse the bottles and the sides of your containers and everything that has been touched. And then if you happen to have any emulsions, you can see that in that bottom picture, the one with the yellow. That's always a real fun challenge to have to work with. How do you handle those? How long do you wait? Is there anything you can do mechanically to collapse that emulsion and make it separate out faster? Because the emulsion, by definition, contains solvent and sample, and most likely there's going to be analyte somewhere in there as well. And so you can't just decide to discard it because it has some of your solvent and analyte in it. You can't just decide to keep it because it has some of your water in it, which is what you're trying to get rid of during this process. And so you've got to wait for it to collapse. Unfortunately, liquid extraction can be the only way to handle specific types of samples. This one still says turbid. I tried to get turbidity out of there. Turbidity is not really the measure what we're looking for, but suspended solids really is kind of what we're looking at. High amounts of suspended solids will affect, generally is your leading cause of emulsions in what you're working with. And so, but certain samples, really this is the only way to do them. So that is something that you do have to be aware of. Solid phase extraction is the time saver here. Just a little bit of history. It was allowed in revision A of method 1664. We're on 1664B now. And it does not need any kind of demonstration of equivalency. It's accepted as an acceptable alternative. The concept behind it is you've got an extraction disc, what we typically work with. Some people use cartridges, but you've got C18 that is your active extraction material. And the sample is extracted through that C18 material, and the C18 kind of acts as an organic compound magnet. It chemically attracts the various organic compounds in the sample, and so they then stick on that C18 disc, and your aqueous phase with all of your inorganic compounds goes through the disc and is off into waste. You then use hexane, which is your solvent specified in the method, to then dissolve the target analyte, the HEM, off of the disc, leaving all the other organic compounds behind on the disc, and you collect your hexane, and then it functions exactly like liquid extraction there. You'll evaporate and weigh your residue. Biggest time saver of SPE over LLE is you've got no emulsions to worry about. Because there is no agitation of the solvent with the aqueous phase combined, there is nothing to emulsify. Your different phases always are essentially not in contact with one another. You save a lot of solvent in use. Generally, you're only using about 45 milliliters total hexane when you're doing this, as opposed to the 100 or so plus that you'll use with liquid. And it can go faster. You don't have to worry about the settling time. You don't have to worry about all the different shaking and venting. Everybody knows what happens if you forget to vent your separation funnels. That could be an explosive problem. But you do have to be aware of samples with that high TSS concentration in it. There's no good way to say what the actual limit is for functionality of that, just because different types of suspended solids interact in different ways. The method does let you use smaller sample volumes in certain instances. You just have to document it and do certain changes in your procedure. You got to do all your QC at the same volume as your sample and so forth. You cannot subsample, so you just have to make sure you do a whole volume analysis of whatever you do. This is our step saver device that we use to help do solid phase extraction. We used to have an all glass system, but glassware manufacturer is not what we do, and it became easier for us to develop a non-glassware version rather than stick with some of the issues that we were having in the glass pieces that we had. So we've got this as a replacement. This can be chained together. The idea is you've got two different sides, one for the extraction and one for the elution. And this setup, the extraction is on the right side, the shorter side, and the elution is on the taller side on the left. And you can chain up to 3 units together on one vacuum source and still achieve adequate performance. And so this will allow you to reduce your hands-on time, kind of chain things together and let samples all work at the same time. Some other things that will help in that hands-on time is something similar to this. This is our quick vap. It helps you with your solvent evaporation stage, and it'll fit either the glass beakers or the glass flasks there, or the aluminum pans, whichever you prefer to use in your process. And there's my final attempt at a wordplay, lubricating the extraction of ATN. This is honestly probably my worst effort. This was kind of at the end of putting this together, and I was out of good ideas. But still, there's other products that we've got. I didn't have the standards, our snip and pour standards, in the main display. They're simply that pre-dosed out vials or containers of the standard. These are PTFE tubes, so they pour out completely. You don't have to worry about residue holding back in the creases. You just cut the top off, pour everything directly into whatever it is you're spiking, and you've got a free dose amount. We've got a couple different variations of the extraction disc. So the ultra flow and ultra low discs are a standard C18. A couple slides earlier mentioned having to activate that material with methanol, and these follow that exact same procedure. That activation is required to kind of open up the chemical functionality of the C18. We do also have a specialty disc, the Ultra Prep, that can also save you just a little bit of that those steps involved in doing the solid phase extraction, and that it does not need to be activated. The C18 resin that we're using in there has some fun in-groups functionality going on, that it is ready to go right out of the box. It does not need that methanol activation. So there's lots of different options that we've got that can help you out in working with oil and grease. So those are the areas that we wanted to kind of talk about today, as far as some ideas on what you can do, how you can help maximize the use of your time, things that can save some of that hands-on or preparation time in doing your test. So it's questions time. If you've got any questions, go ahead and throw them up into the question box, and I will get to those as best we can. Don't ever feel bad about asking questions. I know they're there, so there are no bad questions. There just may be some questions that I may not know the answer to. Oh, wow, Michael chimed back in way back at the beginning. He says he can assemble a auto block fill in 15 minutes or less. So there we are. It's definitely not a competition. I would much rather you do it correctly rather than faster than Michael. He's probably done, I don't know, 6 or 10 of these in the last year at various trade shows. So that's not anything to try to shoot for. All right. Okay, so we do have a question here. Anna's asked a question earlier talking about orders and shipping and so forth. I'll go ahead and address that here now. Just like everybody else, we are working as best we can under the conditions that we have to continue our manufacturing. As I mentioned earlier, the safety requirements that we have in place to keep our employees safe do not allow us to function at the same production capacity that we were in beforehand. There are some delays in some of our products. There have been almost basically since about a week after this started, and there will continue to be delays. My advice for getting your products is to don't think you need to order 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 times your normal amount. Typically, those aren't getting all filled. Those large volume orders are not getting all filled all at one time anyway. They're getting filled bits at a time, so you're only going to receive essentially a normal amount every so often anyway. So just order as regular. Try to be as proactive as you can in putting the orders in, so that we do try to rotate around some of the assembly if we see certain things that are getting a little higher in demand. So just order as normal. Try to be a little earlier in putting the orders in, but don't over order. So got a question on sharing the presentation. The presentation will be put up on the website within a day or so, and it'll be there to be available for viewing for anybody who needs to. Do you have a special rack to hold the bags, the TDS bags, during drying time for large amounts of sample? So we do have an oven rack that we've designed. The containers will only hold about 300 milliliters at a time. But we do have an oven rack. Let's see if I can go back to that page. There it is. So where's my drawing tool? There it is. So this guy right here is the oven rack that we've developed for use with the Stableway vessels. It'll help to prop those bags open at the top so that they stay wide open and allow that evaporation to happen. And because these are taller vessels, sometimes as it gets down to the last little bit, that evaporation can slow down a little bit, just because you've got all the space enclosed inside the vessel that has the water vapor in it. Forced air ovens, convection ovens, work better at clearing things out and helping that evaporation to proceed at a regular rate. What is meant by subsampling versus whole volume in oil and grease? Subsampling referring to analyzing less than 1 liter, and whole volume was. So whole volume is everything in the bottle. Whatever amount is in the bottle, that is the whole volume. Subsampling is what we do with most of our other tests, where we get a sample bottle in, we shake that bottle up to mix it up nice and well, and pour out 50 or 100 mils or whatever it is we need to analyze. You can't do that with oil and grease, because the analytes that we're looking for are, I forget what the term is, but I mean, they stick to surfaces, and you don't ever really get a good dispersion within an aqueous matrix. So you have to just analyze the entire volume that comes in the bottle. We received GGA, so some of the GGA valves have low volumes. They're having to ask, is it okay to add 1 GGA to 1 BOD bottle and pre-rinse 3 times, although low volume? Not sure I quite understand the full question there. If you've got low volume in those GGA vials, so there are two different things that could be happening there. One is it either wasn't filled or potentially leaked, and so you don't have all of the correct amount of standard in there to work with. Don't use those. When these containers are filled with standard, they get sterilized afterwards, and that is done via autoclave. And so when in the autoclave, occasionally some of the water will evaporate out of that bottle. And so the actual level in the vial is a little bit under 6 milliliters. But you've still got the full volume of the right amount of glucose glutamic acid dissolved in that 6 mil, or in that 5.6 milliliters of water, or whatever it is. So in that case, if you're just a little bit under 6 milliliters, that's fine, and that's what's happened there, and those are okay to use. If you're, 5 mils or less, then that's generally an indication that something's happened with that vial, and you should call our quality department give the tech support department a call or whatever. We'll get quality involved in it, and we can get you some replacements out. That's not a big deal to work with. All right. That's all the questions I see in here right now. What other questions does anybody have? We've got about 5 more minutes that we can use. Or if that's it for everybody, then I guess I'll try to fill another 15 seconds or so worth here to give people time to type in if they've got more questions. But I do appreciate everyone being here on there. Are the disposables environment friendly? I presume you're talking about the disposable BOD bottles. So they are I'm losing my mind here on the PET. There we go. Thanks, Michael. PET. So they do fit in that #1 plastic recyclable category, and you just have to get them to your recycling agency, and they're easily recyclable. So there's no problem with that. Is the mod block okay for mercury digestion? I don't know anything about the mod block. That comes from a different company. Hot blocks can be used for mercury digestion. You just need to make sure to set the temperature appropriately. The digestion vessels that we provide do have a mercury level on them, so you can check that out, make sure that meets the detection limit that you need to comply with. And yeah, you can definitely use hot blocks and digestion cups, our ultimate cups, to perform mercury digestions. All right. Looks like our questions have slowed down. We're 3 minutes early, so I'm going to give everybody 3 minutes of their life back. Thanks again, everybody, for being part of what we've been here today. Hopefully, everyone is able to work well, be safe with everything you're doing out there. Make sure to follow your guidelines, stay safe, do what you need to do to keep yourself healthy. And we'll see everybody again the next time. Hopefully, we'll be able to have a methods update rule webinar pretty soon. But if not, we'll be doing another one shortly. Now that we know that it works well, me being from home, we'll probably get another one maybe next month. Thanks again, everybody, for being here, and we will see you next time. Bye.